I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are we using mics tonight or just a recorder? Mics too?
Yep.
We have a fair amount of items on the list for tonight. I don't know if we want to emphasize on some or put a time limit on some of them so we're not here yet at midnight, or just go through them and if Jim gets too windy we'll cut him off, or how do we want to do it?
I can just push him back.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
yeah, no problem.
Yeah. She'll handle it.
Okay, we're good, then we're good. All right, we'll start off with number one, the city budget and property taxes.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to do this in a few parts here. I'm going to basically give an overview of what budgets are like for cities, and then we're going to talk about the tax levy, the property tax levy, and how that is part of our general fund budget. And then I think a couple were asking earlier about how is the property tax actually derived. So I'm going to explain that a little bit. All right. So, city budgets have three main funds. The first is the general fund, and you can tell that basically covers things like city hall, public safety, public works, libraries, cemetery, and in Janesville's case we have a library and cemetery, so that's part of our general fund. And the expenses are paid through with different forms of revenue, such as, of course, property taxes, local government aid. That's a big part of our revenue. We get some franchise fees from the different utilities, and then another big one is payment in lieu of taxes from some of our other funds, and then state aid. Every year we get police and fire aid from the state. So that's the general fund. The other funds are called enterprise funds, and every city is a little different, but in Janesville we have, on the second page here, we have water, electric. The nursing home is obviously city-owned, and it's not out of our general fund, so it has its own enterprise fund. And then sanitary and storm, and then of course the golf course is another enterprise fund. And basically the revenues that these funds receive are, for example, the monthly utility bill or fees for service. And when I say fees for service, that means membership, tea time at the golf course, cart rental, things like that. And then of course the nursing home is the charge per day that you stay there. So that would be a fee for service. So that's how a lot of the revenues come in through enterprise funds. And then the other type fund is a capital reserve fund. And every year what we do is we budget a little bit of money and we put it into the capital reserve, which is basically like a savings account. So when we need a new squad car every 3 years, we don't have to budget huge one year. We can just budget a little bit for 3 years until we have that money. That's a good example of that. Or snow plows, fire trucks, street sweepers, things like that. That's the gist of city budgets.
Are you limited on how much of a fund can go toward their capital reserve fund, such as the public safety fund?
Mhm.
If you aren't limited to 10% or 5% or 20%, so
Not
it's
that I
at
know
our
of.
discretion then.
Yep.
Okay,
I've never heard of any limits on it, so, yeah.
right, thanks.
Good
Park
question.
doesn't show up on here anyplace. I think we received nothing and we're not responsible for anything, is that correct?
Park Road is basically funded through the HUD, federal government, yep.
I'm still having trouble trying, and that's why I need to be sitting down there all the time, other than it's required of.
But we own the building.
Mhm. Yep.
But we're not required for the maintenance on it.
I don't believe we are
No.
responsible for maintenance.
No,
I just found this out tonight too. It costs $345 a day to be a resident at the nursing home.
How much?
Just a fun fact. $345.
Wow.
Just like 4 years ago, it was $156. So,
About 10,000 a month then.
yeah.
The next set of what I'm going to show you here is the general fund budget. This page here is the revenues from our general fund budget. So all these different line items are all the revenues that we take in to balance our expenses, obviously, right? So if you look at the very top line, it says ad valorem. That's a fancy term, which basically means what else do you need to balance your budget, is basically what that is. So if you take all of the general fund expenses and take all the revenues out of them, there's always gonna be some sort of balance that we need to balance the budget. That dollar amount is called the ad valorem tax. That's the property tax that you pay on your property tax statement. So basically, your city taxes that you have on your tax statement covers the balance of the general fund expenses. Does that make sense? Yeah?
So the 598, 918,
Yep.
that's what we pull in a year from taxes.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. And actually, Andy brought up a good point. In 2022, the taxes to balance our budget was 598. You notice this year it's 548. So actually, our property taxes went down a little bit because there was more revenue in the revenue lines. We like that. But property taxes did not decrease in Janesville because the valuations substantially increased throughout pretty much all of Minnesota. But I'll get to that in a second. So that 548,000, can you see my cursor? Right up there?
And so that's a local portion of our property taxes,
Yep, that's the city portion.
okay?
Yep. So Sarah, at the end of the year, when we adopt our budget, we adopt a resolution that accepts that tax levy.
Okay.
And part of that resolution that we'll get to in December, there's some other taxes on there, that we do pay, but that $498,000 there, that was what is needed to balance the general fund budget. Okay? Does that make sense?
On your lower right-hand side, you have SRO from school, 76,000.
That's the
Yep.
Steve's-
police
That's
officer.
Okay, and this school will owe us that
Yep.
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 to bring us from 28 up to 13, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
The schools pay 75% of his salary.
Yep.
That's your money.
I know. I'm gonna tell you. 75% comes from the school.
As you go through a couple, this page right here. Okay, this is a group, it's called Ehlers Associates, I think, or Ehlers Financial, something like that. They're a group in Minnesota, they're a consulting firm that helps cities and counties and school districts with finances. So I pulled some information from some training that the league did a year or two ago from Ehlers, and it's about 4 or 5 pages that explains how property taxes are collected for the city, all right? Property taxes are determined by 3 different levels of government. One is the state legislature, the other is the county assessor, and the third would be us, the local authority. That's a taxing jurisdiction, okay? So the taxes that you pay are based on your net tax capacity. And there's a whole bunch of state laws that determine what your net tax capacity rate is. So we're just gonna give an example of a homestead property, residential homestead property with a EMV. EMV means it's the estimated market value of $200,000. So the county assessor will determine that, let's just say my property is $200,000. State law says that you can have an exclusion with your homesteaded property of up to 40% of the first $76,000 of your value. So if you take 76 times 40%, you could have $30,400 removed from your taxes, or I'm sorry, from your value. And then another law says that anything over 76,000, 9% of that would be taken away from the exclusion to actually get the actual amount you're gonna receive. And I'll show a tax statement here in a second. It's the very top corner of all the property tax statements. So this house is a $200,000 home. It's allowed to have a homestead exclusion of $19,240. So then your market value is gonna be $187.60. Another state law says that the tax capacity of a homesteaded property, you are taxed 1% of your value. So if you take $187.60 times 1%, your net tax capacity is $1,807. Next step. This is where the county calculates your tax rate. And that's quite complicated. It's a really big formula. But you'll get your tax rate, and in this example, it shows it's the city tax rate that year is gonna be 31.2%. You see that? So then when you take your tax capacity of 1807, you multiply it by 31.2%, you're gonna see that you pay $565 on your property tax statement for the city portion of your tax. Now, it kinda seems complicated, but I don't know, I try to whittle it down as best I could. Does that make sense so far?
I'm not good with numbers and I got it.
All right.
Good job.
Essentially 30%.
The tax rate in this example was 31%, yep. And I don't, honestly, I don't know what Janesville's rate is this year. I'm not sure what the county came up with on that. If you look at a tax statement though, I'm just gonna point out the numbers. So this is the estimated market value is $212,000, and that homestead exclusion was, that first page you looked at is 18. So then the total market value is $194. 1% of that is the net tax capacity. So this property had 1,943 times whatever the city tax rate is that year. And that becomes, towards the bottom of the page here, that is the city, where am I? City.
Number 7.
Number 7, yep. So of the $3,800 property tax statement, $1,130 goes to the county, $1,311 goes to the city. Voter approved levy, okay, so A, B, there's a couple school taxes there, you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to show you this too, just because there are some properties in town that obviously have special assessments. For the street projects, and that's right here. So all of your taxes, and then if you happen to have a special assessment, it's added onto your tax, so then it's automatically paid for, you know, when you pay your taxes. So if we did quick math, 1,132 divided by 3,800, what is that? So in this case, the county tax is, this thing doesn't work. 29%. On the city tax, $34. And then the balance, of course, would be the school. And basically, each property is a little different, because now this one has a special assessment. You know, so that would increase the city portion a little bit, just because of that, you know.
Generally, if you have a street project and the assessment is put on the tax rolls, how many years does it take to pay that off?
We normally, when we take our bonds out for projects, we normally do a 15-year. A couple years we did a 20-year, but we try to do 15.
Whatever we set as our schedule for paying off, that's the schedule that.
Yep.
Okay.
So what happens at the end of the year, Fourth Street's a great example, or Allen Street this summer. We had the assessments this spring or early summer, we approved all them, and by the end of the year, I gave all the information to the county auditor, because a lot of people actually paid the assessment in full last summer. So if they did that, then, you know, they obviously have a zero. So what we do is we usually wait till the very end of the year, and then I'll give all that information to the county. And just as an example, don't quote me on this, but this is my place. When we did Fourth Street, I think my assessment was $8,100 or $7,800, something like that, over 15 years. Well, you can see I'm paying about $600 a year for that assessment.
So is that special assessment, is that interest at the same interest that the city pays for our bond? We paid
Yeah.
for it, and we've got the bond over 15 years. Does that $596.44 reflect the same interest rate as the city pays?
Yeah, 'cause I don't think we don't increase the
No.
assessment
No,
percent, yeah.
But they're paying interest on that just at the same as the city is.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
But if they pay the whole works off
Then
in
they-
advance,
They don't have any interest.
no interest.
Right.
Correct.
Yep.
That's it.
That's
They own the
the
advantage of paying it off, right?
And so that they paid that off early, and we have a 15-year bond on it, that money is put into reserve fund then?
It's put into, I'll show you this on Monday. When we look at our bank reconciliation every meeting, there's a whole bunch of funds on that page that
Right.
begin with the 300 funds.
Right.
All of those 300 funds are basically street projects that we're paying off. If that makes sense. Yep.
And money that's paid by the residents
Goes-
for their assessment, that pays off that early,
Mhm.
or is it, okay.
Yep.
That's what I was curious.
Yep.
We don't hold on to that money.
No.
We pay off as much as we can as
Yep.
soon as it comes.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that was my question.
Any questions on all of that? That was budgeting 101 in 16 minutes.
I don't think I've ever seen that breakdown before,
Okay.
or explained
I
that
hadn't
thoroughly.
explained it, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the numbers, and I've seen the
You did a good job.
document. I've never had it explained quite like that. That's very nicely done, thank you.
Thank you.
2024 general fund budget calendar.
Okay, Sarah, what we've done the last, 3, 4, 5 years, is that general fund that I was talking about, police, fire, streets, and all that stuff, we kind of schedule different meetings throughout the summer where department heads come in and we start to look at portions of that budget every month. And then in September, we have to adopt our preliminary budget. But before September, we have all the departments come in at council meetings, and we just kind of one by one look at them, instead of doing them all at once, because that's too much for one night.
Right.
So the schedule here is what we are gonna propose that we have for the general fund visits this year. Beginning at the July meeting, you can tell. We'll take a portion, a couple pages of the general fund budget, and then July 24th, police will be here. Fire department and a few smaller budgets on August 14th, so you can see how that goes. And then Public Works, Joe is basically in charge of streets, highways, and parks.
Okay.
I don't know why we say highways, it's streets, but Joe will come here one evening and he'll go through all his budgets.
Okay.
That's that schedule. Any questions on that? Seems it worked pretty well, I think.
American Rescue Plan.
I put a memo together, actually it was, a year ago, May 2nd. The city council had a work session to talk about what your plans were on spending the rescue plan money that we received from the federal government. At that work session, you identified a list here of 6 items that you would like to see that money go towards. I was just gonna report to you tonight that we have about $65,000 left in that fund because both the Teal Street project that we're doing with the county and that walking path that we are working with the county on, we have discussed taking the city portion out of this rescue plan money, so we have $65,000 left after those 2 projects are paid for. We have until December of 2024 to pay it. Any initial thoughts or any initial ideas how you want to do that 65,000, or should we kinda keep with this list of 6, or?
I think that number 3, is the low priority. We've got so many other things to deal with. The dog park, I think we put that on a future plan. I believe the park, board would agree with that. We
Yeah.
put that on a back burner presently.
Okay, yep.
I would like to see a possibility of, Ivan had talked about, seeding wildflowers, and all of our park area that isn't being used behind Troy Summers and over by Northwoods. I would like to see if we could use some of our funds to get that project started for paths and wildflowers out there. I know the park board has talked about that a little bit, and I even had pursued it some, but I would like to really put that in place of the dog park, or put on that list so that we could look forward, if not this year, maybe next year, look with FSA or Soil Conservation, see if they will cooperate with us on that. But I'd like to put that on this list too.
How much money will it take to finish the amphitheater?
Actually, just this afternoon, we received another donation
Mm-hmm.
of a couple $1,000 from the HEHA group, which we'll be accepting Monday night. I think we get some local volunteers, all the council's coming down to pour concrete down there this week, so that's not gonna cost, so that's not gonna cost us nothing.
When are we doing that?
We'll probably form it Wednesday, pour it Friday, I don't know, something like that. You can bring donuts or something, Jimmy. Bring donuts and stay out of the way, how does that sound?
You know, I can probably handle that part of it.
So I think we'll probably be okay on that. However, we are facing another issue, which we've all talked about a little bit, is that building uptown, 109 North Main.
Oh, that's right, that thing just needs to come down.
Well, it's going to one way or another, but we have to figure out how we're gonna pay for it. There's been some discussion about using some of the EDA's revolving loan funds. That's pretty much the only place we have to pay it from. I am on the EDA as well as Ivan, and I don't have a big problem with that, other than I would like the council to hopefully maybe decide, right now we put $5,000 out of our budget into that EDA fund every year. I would like to increase that line item to 10 or 15,000, because if we take $100,000 out of our EDA revolving loan fund, I mean, I'll try to explain this simple. It's fine if we give an $80,000 loan out to somebody for an EDA loan, because we're getting the money back, it's a loan. If we just plain take that money out of there, it's not coming back. So I would like to try to replenish it by, hopefully the council increasing that line item for the next several years to try to help pay the EDA back some of that money, as well as I was thinking possibly we could use some of these American Rescue dollars to help with that project as well.
So I have some questions.
Shoot.
Who owns that lot? You don't have to tell me, but somebody owns that lot,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can't pay for it? And we can't put some sort of a lien or anything
We could
on
do it,
them?
we could just do it and assess it to their taxes and wait 10 years until they default and then try to get it back then. So we decided to be proactive and just ask them to convey the property to us so we can just deal
Okay,
with it
that was
ourselves
gonna be
and
my
be done
next
with it.
question. So if we're gonna take this down,
It's,
this person
it will
is
be
not-
ours before the
he
work
doesn't
even
get to
starts.
own this
No,
anymore.
It'll be
Okay.
ours.
Okay, I got
Now, what we do with the lot, that's still up for discussion, but we're not gonna,
Parking?
we're not gonna recover anywhere close to the amount of money we're gonna put into it.
Right. But at some point, if that thing doesn't come down quick and we don't take it down quick, somebody's going to get hurt.
Yep. It's coming
And
down
then-
this year.
And then the city's gonna be,
Yep.
then it's gonna be bad.
It's coming
deal.
down.
Okay,
It will be on the EDA's next agenda,
Yep.
and then it will be up for council on, June, 19th. And I expect we'll be making final decisions by then.
okay.
I reached out to Mark Warnicki about bidding it. We're gonna try to reach out to another, maybe Stuart Carlton, North Environmental, about getting a bid on getting it down. We're hoping the bids aren't anywhere as close to what they were the last time.
Yeah, if we could fit in that 100 to 150,
That would be nice.
that would be
The
a...
EDA only has about 100 after a loan we just made. So we, somewhat of a limited budget, but it needs to be done.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can get a more...
I'm hoping with using local contractors and
Yeah.
creative stuff, we can maybe get a little bit more competitive bids out of it.
That'd be
I did talk to Mark, and he is going to look at it, and,
Right,
I mean, the last time, he didn't even bid it.
that'd be...
He will this time, and he's
Yeah,
gonna,
that'd be at least, you went to the right source.
well, absolutely.
And, you know, if, when the building is tore down, it's, like you said, it's owned by the city. If you decide to sell the property, maybe whatever dollar amount you get for the
Goes
property
back to
goes
the
right back to the
EDA
EDA.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we can figure out something.
Yep.
So at this point,
I agree with you, if we do that, we need to,
increase that line item. Basically, what we're doing is an interfund loan, we're borrowing from the 202 fund to the 101 fund, basically.
but if we build that up, then we do have a reserve for a future reference of anything that
Of other projects,
would
yes.
happen. And EDA would have money for the loan program
Yep.
and for any kind of a community emergency we would have too. I think that's a good concept, that's a very good.
That's my only thing, as far, what did you think about that? I know we had some discussion at this on EDA.
Yeah, you know, the EDA,
They're not crazy about giving their money up, but
yeah, it says we're responsible for demolition on dilapidated buildings. So, we have no funds earmarked for that.
So this could be like a start of that.
well, we're
In case it
just
were to
basically
happen.
taking it out of our revolving loan
Yeah.
fund. It's the same fund we use for, you know, financing small businesses when they come to us for loans, stuff like that. It does fall within our parameters to be able to use it that way. My issue with it is if we use it that way, we're not getting it back.
Right.
I don't mind borrowing it out because then we get it back with interest. So this way, we're not really gonna set up a loan to the city. I just think we need to look at, come budget time, increasing that line item.
Okay.
And I think the EDA would feel better about it, knowing that that's under our radar for consideration.
I know there's some grants out there for, refreshing urban renewal. I don't think we have time to apply for grants in this case.
The next grant that we would possibly qualify for, according to what Sarah has found for me, is due August 1st.
Yeah,
And then you still, that particular one, according to, she called up there and asked for me. Basically, if you apply for the grant, you really can't start the project until you know if you get it.
yep.
I don't know that we're in position to wait any longer on this.
Right.
Another winter on that building, the whole thing will be laying
It's
on
5
the
or 6
sidewalk.
years past what it should have been done anyway, already.
Yeah.
Get
Or
it done
more.
so we can get those walls closed up that need to be.
Yeah, we did have the building owners on the two sides of it in our last EDA meeting. I mean, there's a lot of different common law, or common wall laws and rules, and way over my head, but
Yeah.
we've been discussing it with the lawyers a little bit. I mean, there should be some cost share with the two buildings beside it. As
That's
far
what I was
as,
gonna ask.
as far as the common wall, I mean, they're not responsible for the demo or nothing, but as far as bringing them common walls up to exterior standards, there should be some cost share there. We did mention it in the meeting, nobody took a swing at us, so something.
Until the building comes down.
And nobody cocked a rifle, right?
No, so far so good, I guess.
Until the building comes down, we truly don't know if we have a common wall situation.
A lot of these buildings uptown, and until you really get looking, you might think they're common walls, but they're not.
Right, right.
Like my Wisties building, that was not actually even a common wall.
Well, wasn't it?
No, there was two walls side by side.
Okay.
There was the Wisties wall and there was the...
And so that maybe, if that's the case, we find over there, that'll be a lot easier to do too.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So, we're on number 3, the American Rescue Plan, getting sidetracked, but I would like to, possibly, we may need some of that money for that building uptown.
So you want to add that to our list of items?
Yes, I'd like to add that to our list, and I think we're pretty much safe. We can probably, as long as we can get some volunteer, we can pretty much cover the amphitheater without doing anything out of
Yeah.
this fund. I think we'll be okay.
So I can say remove number 3.
Remove number
Number
3,
one.
remove number 1.
And number 4 could probably come off, because that's something that, there are a lot of alleys that need to be looked at, but maybe we can...
We did talk about rewriting the capital improvement
Yeah.
plan to include alleys. We've actually discussed that with,
Yeah, with Jason.
Jason a couple of times.
I'd like to put that into the streets project.
Right,
rather
Yep.
we
than-
have discussed that with him, trying to work that
Rather
into
than
our
just
capital.
put it in street project.
And put it on a schedule.
Mhm.
Yep.
I think so too.
That's something maybe we could just refresh Jason's memory about.
I
But
did
that's where I
last
take- I take
Thursday.
it off.
Yeah, we have discussed it, but.
I would take it off here and put it in that.
Yes.
That's what we're planning on doing. Actually, Joe and I both were emailing Jason last week on that
Okay.
stuff, so.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, community center vision.
Yeah, last week there was a EDA meeting. Ben reported that the open house at JWP went very, very well. I do know there was another meeting last
That's nice.
week after that. So where are we at with updates, or Ivan, you wanna go, or?
Ivan, Gina, somebody?
Gina?
Gina. Yeah, that way it's, we can hear you on the recording and stuff. Everybody's gonna, people just flock to this on YouTube, so you're gonna be famous by tomorrow.
Signing your name.
I figured.
That's why I dressed up so much. Moss Arms shirt.
Well, don't expect another one.
I would expect one.
There
I
are
worked for
business.
you, do you remember that?
Feel neglected, don't we?
Anyway.
Yeah, Ivan asked me to come tonight. We had a meeting last week with the community center, just kind of updating within our group since we had the town hall. We did have a really good turnout, at the town hall. Andy came, which was nice, thank you. It was a good discussion, a lot of positive feedback, from community members, which was nice to hear. More or less, we were just explaining as much as we could at this point, what's gonna be in it, the concepts. Do you want me to go over that right now with you guys, or are you
Yep.
familiar with it?
Go right ahead, that's
Okay.
what you're here for.
Okay, perfect. So as of now, there's just been discussions on what's to be needed. Just going off the top of my head here, we would like to include a new library, because the current building is just not sufficient enough. It's over 100 years old. It's not ADA, handicap accessible. It's just, I know the recent librarian actually put in her notice to not work anymore because she's sick of going up those stairs, and it just doesn't work for what is needed right now. So, new library would go into it. Also, a child care center. We're working with the school board right now to see if they can extend their programming, to be within the community center. Right now, what they offer at the school would be like a preschool, age, so it'd be 3 years old, 4-year-old, they offer childcare in the afternoons if you're going to preschool. So we, brought it to them, for example, Maple River, they do a birth to school age program, and that's ran through their daycare and school. And so I talked with Jeremy earlier, and I asked him if right now if their program is, 2 questions. I said, are you profitable? He said, yes. Number 2, are you full? Yes. So, right there that tells us, okay, now here's an opportunity. If you go into the community center, you could expand your offerings, you could grow your program, and then for them, it could just, we're proposing the city would own the building, and then they would operate out of it.
Like lease from,
Correct.
lease that area?
Lease, yeah, the space, and then they would be responsible for running it, within,
The school, you mean?
yeah,
Okay.
extending their program. So right now, the school board has made a committee within themselves to kind of focus on that, and that part. So, childcare center, library, and then also, our school right now is kind of acting as our community center, so we're, as far as gym space, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the school's facility and everything, but between the media center and the gyms, it's basically rented out until like 9 p.m. every single evening with the youth sports. I mean, and you gotta remember, we lost Waldorf's gym. So for example, you're now housing more kids with the same amount of gym space and recreation space. So between recess and then also like their school-age care and wraparound program, who also like to use it for free play, and then the youth community, I mean, the gyms are booked out every single night. So we would like to have some gyms within the community center. So that part, we don't know how many gyms, but some gym space that the community could use, and then if the school needed to, again, maybe rent that, or however they come up with an agreement in Trinity to use that space. So gyms, childcare, library, and then, what am I missing, Ivan? Oh, a walking track above the gyms that the community members could use, seniors, kids, parents, while kids are using the facility. And then a common space that, like a large room, picturing just a large banquet-style room that could be rented out for parties, graduations, senior center, to play cards, whatnot. And again, thinking of the vision for the whole community, you know, picturing like if we're hosting a youth tournament there on the weekend, we'd also like to have like a lobby space where it could be concessions, and then a general area, for example, let's say if people walked on the track in the morning, or we even mentioned you could play pickleball on the court, there's a lot of multi-purpose for the courts, then you could have like coffee or donuts out in that lobby center area, since we don't have a space for that in town. So, yes, it would be a large space. Right now, we're trying to figure out what the space, the footprint would be, so that's kind of our next step. ISG told us, they're the architectural firm out of Mankato. Jake Sonic has been very helpful. He lives in Janesville here. His wife is a teacher at the school. ISG will do plans for you at no cost unless you use them. So I think kind of our next step is to work with them, and kind of our plan would be work with the school and say, so, for example, how many kids are we looking at to have childcare for? You know, is it 100? Is it 150? Right now, what our, when they did the recent survey, it said it was a shortage of 200? I don't have my notes in front of me.
Oh, I got, it's the next thing on the agenda.
When we started this, I was telling everybody in town 120, and that's the number that shows up on the surveys that we're going to look at yet.
Okay.
Need for 120 additional daycare.
120 is the spots. So I'm not sure what they would plan for. I'm just giving a number because, let's say if you're doing a child care facility, they'll tell you you're going to need 60 square foot per child. So if you're planning for a 100-kid center, you're going to need 6,000 square feet. So that's kind of how we're going to go about our plan is, okay, so we're going to need a child care space for this big. And then, you know, depending on how many gyms do we want to put in there. And then the library has came up with a number, what they would like to see based on the materials they have and the people in the space. So off of that, I think our next step would be to come up with a plan from ISG.
Yep.
So then based on that number, then we would, Ivan and I discussed maybe identifying 2 or 3 locations, and then again, leaning on like ISG to kind of determine the space, oh, would this work here, and parking, they're also gonna tell you, if you have a facility that's 60,000 square feet, just giving you an idea, you're gonna need 200 spots. First of all, there's...
Formulas.
Yeah, exactly, and they've done this before.
And of course, our zoning requirements as well, so.
Sure. I'm sure there's a lot more involved in this. So what we're saying is we'd probably identify a couple spaces, and then they would tell us whether that would work there or not, and then the next, we brought up 2 last week. I mentioned that I think hiring a grant writer would be an investment for us, just because I know how many are out there, and it is a job. By looking, I spent, I think, 3 hours, and I got, I just looked. And so, some people have mentioned already, can we start fundraising or donating? This is where I'm struggling, is how do you fundraise for something that doesn't exist? You know what I'm saying? So the one thing I'm thinking too is if we do start getting the word out, if there's any dollars raised, it could go towards hiring a grant writer, is one thing I thought of, so you could actually tell people that it's going towards something. I don't know, I just have a hard time writing a check for something that doesn't exist, is where I'm at, or approved for that part. So I don't know too, is there something that is approved based on getting funding from a grant? You know what I'm saying? I'm having a hard time, what comes first? So that's kind of where we're at. I guess we're at the point where we're ready to get plans made and get size made and give people something to look at and the reasons for this and the needs. But then also the next steps, kind of a couple things need to happen at once. So.
One thing we're having a little trouble on is some of the smaller things, like a meeting room for the Boy Scouts, place where they can store all their stuff, because if that all comes out of the library, where is it gonna go? It would need to go to the community center probably to be stored, and so they had a meeting room.
Why would they have to come out of the library? The library isn't being used as a library, it could be used as a Boy Scout center.
I'm thinking that we were getting rid of the library because it's not handicap accessible. So why do we keep wanting to send residents in there if it's going to continue to be a burden on the city? That's my thought.
Okay.
But we'd tear it down?
I don't think we can tear it down.
That's what I was gonna say, it's a national,
You can't.
state historic,
No, we can't.
right.
It'll be illegal.
You'd
There
have to-
is things you can do with it.
Well, you can, a lot of Carnegie buildings are now museums and things like that.
No, there are uses for it.
Yep.
I'm just saying that the Boy Scouts don't have to leave there, but yeah, as long as you're building the building, try to include everybody you can.
We got talking about what would you do outside the building. Well, one of the requirements of a daycare is that they have an outdoor play center. You also need several indoor play centers. If you have 5 different ages of children, you need 5 different rooms to put them in. One for 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, and 3-year-olds.
I assume that's coordinated into your square foot plan per child?
Mm-hmm.
So, when you talk
And that
about
was one thing we
daycare-
mentioned, was an indoor playground that could be used by the daycare, and then, for example, on the weekends, if you brought your, kinda like if you've ever been to the Children's Museum in Mankato, they have that indoor play space, and again, it's just Minnesota. Anything that indoor recreation, I just think could be a win, and you could then charge to use that space.
When we say daycare,
Mm-hmm.
are we talking about just the school wraparound program, or are we talking about like daycare? Because doesn't that conflict with people that live in the town that do that as a job? Now you're going to take revenue away from them, potentially.
Right now, there's 100 kids shortage,
Right.
so I don't think you'd be taking any
Anything
spots away. It would,
Right,
if anything, adding
I get that, but
kind of supply and demand.
is there any sort of, like, if we, say we were, like, maxed out, and we had enough, and we're trying to compete now with our community members? Is there any sort of,
Well, we are not competing because the city is not gonna be in the daycare business.
well, and that
We
was
may
gonna be
own
my
the
next
building, we may own the
question.
building.
That was gonna be my next question, like, is the city going to be owning this daycare, because we can't even get people to work at the nursing
We
home?
may own the space, we
Can't-
can't
or
even sell
here.
City Hall.
Right,
We may
Okay.
own the space, but we won't own the
Okay.
building.
Correct.
that
No.
answers a lot of questions for me then.
There's no intentions of the city running a daycare.
Okay.
Or operating, correct,
Okay.
yes.
Thank
That's
you.
why we reached out to the school, because they already have a program
Yeah.
that is established and
Yeah,
then maxed
exactly.
out.
Right.
So, we just thought it would be a great opportunity for them as well.
Expansion opportunity.
Mhm.
I just needed a little clarification.
Totally, no, that's valid,
In our experience, when we had children, private daycare was always cheaper than professional. And so the people that are doing it in their homes are probably gonna be less expensive than a organized daycare, so they probably, you wouldn't be competing with them. You'd simply be an alternative.
And I agree, the
If
school
we
was
look at,
overrun.
Yeah,
if
It
we
is.
look in this wayfinder, it says we've got, 213 kids under 5. We have a shortage of 121 kids needing daycare.
So we're half.
Yeah.
Well, Gina, I thank you for the update, and I
Mhm.
thank you and the whole committee for the work you're putting into this, and
No,
just
you guys.
No, you-
keep us updated and let
You're-
us know what we can do to help, so.
Okay, very good.
You're moving along quickly and doing very well.
That's what we wanted.
Yep, exactly.
Thanks, Gina.
Yep.
I agree with that grant writer though, 'cause if that individual gets one grant, you're way money ahead.
Absolutely, and I just think any of us don't have the time or the qualifications to do that. So I don't know if you guys know of any either. Do you have resources for some that, I also would like something that, somebody that's familiar with small rural communities, because I know there's a lot out there for that, and the childcare aspect. Clinton,
Hmm.
do you know of any?
I've been looking.
Well, that Brian Voss from Wasika, he's done a bunch for their fire department, and he's got a couple huge ones.
Daycare?
Well, grants in general.
Oh, yeah,
You're asking about a grant writer.
yeah, there's grant writers out, yeah, it's just a matter of finding one, I guess, I mean. it's-
If, I know there was some pretty strong stipulations on that American Rescue Plan money. If the opportunity was there and they needed a few dollars to help with that, can that money go that direction, or is that not something you can look into?
I
maybe?
don't-
I know there was some accounting stipulations with it. Keep doing the good work and let us know what we can do to help you.
Okay,
We will do everything we can.
okay,
I was gonna reference a name, can you wanna stick around for 30 seconds?
yeah. I think the school too is familiar with a couple, Andrew and Jeremy mentioned, so I can reach out to them.
And you know what?
I just wanted to run it by you guys first,
I mean-
on the grant writer aspect.
And I've worked with that Brian before in fire department grants and stuff, I mean, there's companies out there that'll write it for you, and if you get the grant, then they charge you.
Right, they work on
You know,
commission.
things like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, what the grant, they are normally a percentage of.
They're not always, no, you can't just flat out hire them, but
Okay.
there is some that work on commission.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Be worth looking into during our budget process.
You guys, let me know.
Yeah, on our next,
Number 5, childcare visioning.
okay, so with their childcare visioning here, there's a lady from, it's called Childcare Wayfinder, and it's in your packet, Gina.
Yeah,
The lady's name is Gwen Lynch. I visited with her a couple weeks ago, and actually she emailed me again today. She would like to come either by Zoom or in person. She would like to come and possibly visit with, you know, either the EDA or the community center group to talk about what is really needed, what are the steps necessary to get a daycare center operating. The conversation I had with her on the phone a couple weeks ago was really great. I learned a lot, actually. There's a lot of, I don't want to use the word hoops, but there's a lot of things to go through. There's a lot of things that people think in their heads about daycares that she helps get out and her group that she works with is trying their best to get the daycare shortage solved in southeastern Minnesota. She's from Red Wing, I believe, but she's more than willing and she wants to come to visit with us. And that 121 students shortage, or child shortage that Ivan was talking about, that was a study that her group had referenced. There was a statewide study, and then it focused on this region, and that's what that information is here in your packet tonight. Should I maybe contact Ben and see if we can get her lined up to come to a community center meeting? Would Ben be the right person to?
Yep.
Okay.
We do have a couple of people that are working on getting childcare now, using the churches in town.
A temporary solution.
Temporary solution. I don't know how many kids they're talking, but they're looking into licensing and inspecting the churches they want to use. It'd be a community project, because if we put it down to the Methodist church in the basement, then when they have a funeral, where do they go? Well, they're gonna go to we've talked to the Faith Lutheran Church, and they get to go there for a funeral there. So, it'll all be tied together. We don't know who would run it yet.
So, and then I'll get in touch with Ben. I'll let her know too tomorrow that I may cross her. Oh,
Nice to see this moving forward.
They're doing great work with it.
They're thorough.
A lot of people involved.
They focus on access.
And I like the
Multifaceted building, there's a lot of.
multifaceted, you touch on a lot more people.
It's really too bad swimming pools are so expensive.
What's gonna be expensive?
I just think that so many of the older people would love that. They can do their jazzercise and all that stuff in there. But I get it. They're
Never seen
conservative.
anything. Never seen any projection about what kind of money
Not
you're
that bad,
gonna.
there's a lot
It's
of.
the maintenance, yeah.
So, the one thing we did do at the last community center meeting is we talked about not putting exercise and weight room in there, just because the EDA just spent a bunch of money establishing a new business in town that does that. So,
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I'm,
yeah,
Why compete with something that's already there?
right,
How do you complement it?
right.
This model?
yeah.
And the pool was mentioned at the town hall by quite a bit of people, which, I think we mentioned, pools are expensive. And we did also talk about Plain, for example, did one, and once they included a pool, it was deemed a want versus a need. But there's also some benefits of need of a swimming pool too, like swimming lessons that people mentioned, like in the winter time offering, and like exercise. So it did kind of make us realize that it was town hall, because we had initially discussed that lot that the school owns with the softball field, and that kind of after the town hall made us realize, well, if this many people are interested in some other options, and like Crystal was there, and they said they're now expanding for the third time, maybe we do want to be at a place where we could expand if necessary.
That's what I was
You hate to
wondering.
landlock yourself right off
Right.
the gate, so that kind of, I think was a good, brought up from the meeting to know that we should probably identify some things
Something
that
that's
are
maybe a little bit bigger than what you need.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly, not
yeah,
just what would fit, but maybe for,
potential.
you need to put up a building and then not have ample parking, or you couldn't.
Right, and you're doing just a
Right.
wonderful job with the building, and then all of a sudden you're like, well,
Then
now
all
we
of a sudden,
want,
well,
we can't.
Yeah, so, that was one thing that came out of that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Housing Study and Housing Study Institute report.
Yeah, let me get to that. Number 6. Okay, last year we completed a housing study to determine the housing needs in Janesville. The Minnesota Housing Finance Association, they our Housing Institute, I'm sorry, they helped pay for part of our grant. So by having them pay for part of our grant, we were required to join their institute, which is what we have done. We are one of 3 or 4 communities that is in the institute this year. We have meetings here, it used to be every other week, now it's about once a month, and we've gone to Rochester a few different times to learn about the various programs, the various state agencies and things that can help with housing. We have another meeting, our last meeting will be in July, and prior to that July meeting, our past meeting, we put together this concept paper. The concept paper is basically a background of the housing needs in Janesville and what we need to do to move forward with all this.